and welcome to what is a new format of Left Foot Finish, the best place for pub chats and arguments about the beautiful game. On this episode of Left Foot Finish, we're taking a deeper look at the events unfolding in Manchester, the United faithful, and their relationship with the Glazer family. The European Super League was flawed from its very conception, and lasted for less time than that of a mayfly. The consequences, intended or otherwise, resulted in total war between Football League factions, fans, owners, players and managers. It cost the jobs of several chairmen and upper management, and even threatened the status of some of Europe's top clubs. The ill-fated league was the brainchild of some of European football's most influential executives, and spearheaded by Real Madrid's Florentino Perez in Spain, and the three American ownership groups in England's Premier League. We could and probably will do an entire show on the brash and out-of-touch decisions made by these execs in forming the Super League. But the events unfolding in Manchester are still ongoing and made us think, what is happening up there, what caused it, and is there a solution? Ed Woodward, soon to be the former executive vice chairman of Manchester United, was one of the aforementioned few who has quote-unquote stepped down from his position at the end of the season. However, this was not enough for the Red Devils faithful, as protesters stormed Old Trafford and protested outside the players' hotel prior to the Northwest Derby between Manchester United and Liverpool. The stepping down of one scapegoated executive did not fly for Man United supporters, and protests centered largely around United's current ownership group, the Glazer family. But the relationship between the United supporters and the Glazers goes back farther than anger and frustration caused by the Super League. The relationship has not been a happy one since Malcolm Glazer purchased a majority stakeholding in the team back in 2005. And indeed, the announcement of a breakaway Super League was only the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back. So what exactly is going on between the United faithful and the Glazer ownership group? Well, first, it would be prudent to understand how Manchester fared in the pre-Glazer era. United is no stranger to takeover bids. In 1991, the club was listed on the stock exchange, resulting in a 1998 takeover bid from the British Sky Broadcasting Corporation, owned by Rupert Murdoch. Fearful of this, supporters of the club formed the Shareholders United Against Murdoch, which would eventually become the Manchester United Supporters Trust. And this would aid in blocking the takeover. Considering the News of the World scandal, a media corporation also owned by Murdoch, and how he generally conducts himself in his businesses, hindsight says that this was a wise move by supporters. And this is a common theme between the club and its supporters, indeed for any English clubs. The bond between fan and club in the world of football is often stronger than in any other sport. This is partly because of the roots of football, and partly due to the intensity of domestic fan bases. As shown by the attempted Super League, this concept is far beyond the understanding of many of the owners in the modern football game. Unlike professional teams in North America, football supporters are used to having a say in the direction of their club, whether it's big or small. One only has to recall when Assem Alam, owner of Hull City, wanted to change the name simply to the Tigers. The Hull faithful quickly put an end to that notion through a series of protests. Following the Murdoch takeover bid, majority ownership was eventually purchased by two Irish businessmen, John Magnier and J.P. McManus, who in the early 2000s attempted to have Alex Ferguson removed as manager, resulting from a reported dispute over the ownership of a championship horse. The board, realizing that this would be a big mistake, started approaching investors to reduce the influence held by Magnier and McManus, which leads us to Malcolm Glazer. Prior to the Glazers' involvement in the club, United had already turned things around and was a dominant force in the domestic and European competitions. 8 Premier League titles, including the famous treble in 1998, check out the documentary Class of 92. 4 FA Cups between 94 and 04. 1 European Cup. Strong development standards. Quality scouting. A global brand. And do you see where I'm kind of going with this? The cherry on the top of this sundae was how well the club was doing financially, accruing little to no debt at all. Apart from 2 unoriginally Scot-hating Irishmen, the club did not need to be sold. So it was a bit of a shock and the cause for some confusion when it was announced that in 2005, Malcolm Glazer, an American businessman, had purchased a majority stake in the club. Oh, and to do so, he borrowed heavily, resulting in the immediate indebtedness of the club, something United fans were not accustomed to. At a time when being financially strong was becoming increasingly important in the evolving football game, it was the cause for some worry. So, in the matter of one transaction, Manchester United went from being debt-free, locally owned, and in tune with the fans, to having a reverse invasion resulting in an American ownership, more debt than your unemployed brother-in-law at Christmas, and an ownership group that was immediately, and to this day, remained distant from the fan base. Now, this isn't your local baseball team. These are fans from a country that gave us the term hooligans. Even before the bid was official, protests erupted outside Old Trafford, with fans burning effigies of the potential owners. The debt got, and continues to be, so bad that United fans protested it once again in 2010 during a Champions League match. They still had Fergie, they still had quality players, and they won the league 5 times between 2007 and 2015. But it was becoming more evident that the bubble was about to burst, both on and off the pitch. Ferguson would be gone in 2 years, and the club's lineup would begin to fall apart. Despite the debt of the club, the Glazer family would continue to prosper off the dividends from their ownership of the club. The financial restructuring done by the Glazers was even done with the dividends kept in mind. As a result, the fans never softened on the Glazers, and herein lies one of the major issues that was the cause for the Super League. Ownership groups that treat football clubs like just another business. Is football a business? Or is it something more than that? Is it even a business at all? Or is it just entertainment? Who is it really for? The fans or the executives making money off of the fans? I think that there are some important philosophical questions that football needs to answer, which will decide how the game is going to be shaped in the years to come. Now, I am of the more classical and less cynical point of view. I don't believe that football is, or ever really should be, solely a business concerned with profits for owners. Of course, no one who buys a club does so with the intention of losing money, apart from the rare instance when a lifelong fan purchases a club out of nostalgia or reverence. Sports teams are a different kind of business, where success is determined by more than the numbers on the balance sheet. It certainly plays a role, but it should not be the main reason behind the decisions of a club. One needn't look any further than Arsenal, who placed importance on balanced books over everything else. The one-time Invincibles began to suffer on the pitch as a result, and had become a fledgling upper to mid-level club. They even tried convincing Robin van Persie to stay by showing him how balanced their books were. And this only caused to further upset the Dutchman, as trophies were few and far between, and he would eventually join and win the league with United. Clubs cannot be concerned with only the numbers. If they do, their competitiveness and success on the pitch will suffer. And I believe this for all sports. Sports are entertainment. They are the great escape. Football is an exercise in escapism. For 90 minutes, you don't have to think about your job. You don't have to think about your bills. You don't have to think about what you're going to make for dinner, your wife, your kids, your husband, where that smell is coming from, if you're popular, what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Hell, you don't even have to think about yourself. You turn that game on, and for 90 minutes, you're not Rick from New York, or Mary from Sheffield, or Bruce from Sydney. You are the white of Madrid, the claret and blue of West Ham, the red and black of Milan. You are a part of something bigger, especially if you live in the city or town that your club plays in. You feel like you can and are a part of not only the club, but the decision-making process as well. There's no stronger argument for this than football is for the fans. In its roots, English soccer clubs and leagues were formed not by the haves of the day, but by the average working man who needed an escape from life and who strived for something that was collectively their own, and not tainted by those who sought to exploit them for larger profit. Somewhere along the way, this idea that football is for the fans was forgotten, and big shot executives only see the clubs in red or black, dollars and cents. Now, this is not an argument about rich versus poor or inequality. I don't really care if people have lots of money or not, or how they came to be by it. But executives who try to run the club solely like businesses and forget that the game is more than just a product, that it is a way of life, the result always is a disconnect between ownership and fan bases. The foreign owners can be a blessing. They can be the savior of many clubs and at times can be of the same mind as their fans, striving to reach the same goals. Look at PSG, an ownership group who believed that the city of Paris was deserving not only of a top quality football club in the domestic league, but a European champion as well. But American ownership is quite often different, and one such as the Glazers is the worst kind. They are distant and aloof, counting the profits while feeding supporters lines about how much they invested in players or giving them empty promises, such as what was seen after the Super League debacle. Americans, and this is actually a point of admiration though, see and do things their own way, not the way the rest of the world does it. It's for this reason they're not like traditional European owners, who are often fans of the club or at the very least understand what it means to be a fan of any football club. One member of the Manchester United Supporters Trust was quoted as saying, "After 16 years, not one member of the Glazer family has ever had so much as a conversation with us." Other ex-Man United executive Peter Kenyon stated rather bluntly that, "I don't believe the Glazers really know what football is all about." During the '05 takeover bid, some fans spoke to CNN and expressed their fears that the Glazers would saddle the club in debt and be solely interested in revenue and brand, one that could rival Real Madrid. Now, providing some light for American ownership groups, a man by the name of Joseph DeGrossa, chairman of the Capital Football Club, who's had discussions with Premier League clubs in the past, says current owners have run trouble by, quote, looking at club ownership like owning any other business. That is, with a profit motive foremost in their minds. We never believed the Super League would move forward because we knew it wouldn't get the support from the fans. This was said in an interview with CNN. It's this type of distance and profits-oriented ownership that causes so much frustration among fan groups. And with the announcement of the Super League, which seemed to be an attempt at a quick cash grab by Europe's biggest clubs, who are currently riddled in debt, and the fact that it was spearheaded by 3 American ownership groups, one being the Glazers, it was only a matter of time before fans started calling for change again. Initial protests put a stop to the Super League, with the English clubs pulling out quicker than your high school boyfriend after your dad walked in. Liverpool players only furthered the truth of their club words, "You'll never walk alone," and stepped up for the fans in an inspiring fashion. The Super League was announced down but not out, with Florentino Perez stating that they will come back in one form or another. But protests flared up once again in Manchester prior to the derby with Liverpool, because they've had such a tumultuous time with current ownership. The demands are quite simple, perhaps unrealistic though, given who the owners are. But giving up is not in the blood of football fans. Their demands? Give the fans more say in club decisions, or at the very least, transition to a fan-oriented ownership group. There are some that have called for the figurative heads of the Glazers, but not all the supporters, at least not yet anyway. Given the current climate and the battered history of the relationship, full change in ownership protests are probably not far away. Some of the demands could even open up an opportunity for this. From the Manchester United Supporters Trust, they came up with a list of 4 demands and presented it to the club. 1. Back a government review and rebalance the current ownership structure in favor of the supporters. 2. Appoint independent directors. 3. Adopt a share scheme giving fans the same voting rights as the Glazer family with the New York Stock Exchange listed business. And 4. Fully consult fans on any significant changes to the club. Now, there is a precedent in England for ownerships to give in to fan demands, as was seen in Liverpool in 2010, when fans called for the ousting of then American owners Tom Hicks and George Gillette Jr. after the club became burdened in debt. History, as they say, could be set to repeat itself. Now, the idea of the Super League must have truly appealed to the Glazers. Like, it was 5 minutes to closing time, and they was the last girl the club not already wrapped up around someone bigger, taller, and richer than them. A cash cow, and one where they did not have to share with the lesser clubs. But the Glazers either forgot, did not care, or were most assuredly unaware of the bond between supporter and club, between fan and football. You do not fuck with football, because it will fuck you up back. Due to their distant rule over the club and seeming disinterest in the club, other than, of course, the revenues it provides, and their disinterest in the fans and the game, they truly were not aware of the backlash and the shitstorm coming their way. Then again, maybe they did know. Maybe there was someone who was aware and informed them of the colossal uproar they were about to cause. But they still went ahead as planned, and they only came out looking like they always have, money hungry and at the very least disinterested, if not disdainful of the fans and the game that the fans care so much about. Really, I'm not sure which is the worst case, ignorance or indifference. So, is there a foreseeable solution? Well, possibly. The Glazers could, however unlikely, could give in to the fan demands and begin to include them once again in club decisions. but this would involve operating the club as if it were a football club and not just a business. Something the Glazers don't see where another American ownership group takes over. But Man United is so much more than just a club anymore. It is a brand. I know I've been harping against this, but brands are good. They grow the game. I just don't believe it should be the only thing ownership groups should be concerned with. And Man United is the biggest brand in football right now, next to Real Madrid. In fact, they sold more jerseys than any other club, Real included, from 2011 to 2016. Based on the conduct of the Glazer Group, I don't think they would want to give up United anytime soon. They, after all, are still pulling dividends from the club. Possibility of outside solution is there as well. England could implement a 50+1 rule similar to that of Germany's legislation. Boris Johnson threatened as much during the 2-day lifespan of the Super League, but I think United supporters are going to have to look elsewhere for a white horse, so long as they stay the fuck away from David Benioff and DB Weiss. We've seen the United faithful protest even in the middle of championship seasons, and they are finally beginning to turn things around in the post-Ferguson era under Ollie. But we've seen this before from United. One good season followed by a rather lackluster one. I do believe things might be different this time, however. I do foresee future protests until there's either change or the Glazers ride it out and the protesters go home. Now, to that end, the most recent report out of the Glazer camp is that co-chairman Joel Glazer has set a time and place for the first meaningful discussion with United fans since the team was purchased way back in 2005. He also acknowledged that there was, quote, a need for change. At times like this, even through turmoil and frustration, we can see how football is the beautiful game in more ways than one. Fan involvement, at least in the moment right now, appears to have brought about some semblance of change. Not only was the Super League, a league for executives, thrown out in 48 hours, but United supporters have finally gotten the Glazers to come to the table. We will have to wait and see if the discussion truly is meaningful or if it's just an exercise in lip service. However, it does seem like it's a step in the right direction. And remember, football is for the fans. Much of the research and information provided in this piece was based upon the following articles: Man United fans' protest and their history of conflict with the Glazers by the Associated Press, May 3rd, 2021, and Not Such a Special Relationship: U.S. Owners' Checkered History of Investing in English Soccer by Ben Morse of CNN.